And we have all at some point made a bad decision that had a big influence later on in life. But shit, that Tenma guy, damn. Hello brothers and sisters, my name is Daidarius. Welcome to the review of Monster. Now Monster is a manga by Naoki Urasawa, and it was created at the same time as he first wrote Pluto, which is another manga that I'm planning on reading later on, and then 20th Century Boys, which is also a manga I plan on reading later on. So that means he was writing and drawing two mangas at the same time at any given point of the iteration of this manga. That is freaking insane. Now I've been fortunate enough to read this manga through its perfect edition. That means it is in 2-in-1, it is a bit bigger, and also if there is any colored pages throughout the manga, then they are printed in color in this version. However, it doesn't really matter if you read it in normal version on this one, because the story is gonna be basically the same. So let's just review the story. So the story begins in 1986 in Germany, where a young Dr. Tenma is a prodigy of a surgeon who mainly just operates on the most important people in all of Germany. One fateful night he decides to not operate on an opera singer, but instead operating on a 10-year-old unknown boy, because the boy technically came first. And that single event turns out to be significantly important because it's gonna completely destroy Tenma's life for the next 12 years. First off, he's demoted, he loses his engagement, his father-in-law is murdered, and just in general, he's put as a scapegoat. Now, without going into details in what exactly happened, we then jump 9 years into the future, so it's now 1995, and here Tenma gets to know a special patient with, after the certain events later on, finds and meets this young boy he saved 9 years prior. And it turns out that this guy is a quote-unquote monster. He murders a lot of people, and now Tenma becomes the main suspect in those murders, because some way or another he's kinda connected to these people. What then follows is that Tenma is running away from the police, and in the meantime also trying to find this person and then deal with this quote-unquote monster. And that is basically the story of this manga summed up. I mean, there is a lot more content in here, and the plot keeps shifting and keeps you guessing of what's gonna happen next. But when we boil this plot down, basically Tenma is trying to find this person and deal with them and make sure that no one else gets hurt. That's basically the premise, but trust me, there's a lot more to it than just that. So what I really like about this story is the fact that it is more realistic and down to earth than other mangas that I've read recently. And I mean, I haven't read that many manga, but the most of them I've read is shonen manga, and they tend to be over the top, simplistic, and just fantasy inspired or something like that. Whereas in here, it is very grounded in reality. The pacing is extremely slow, but not boringly slow. It's just slow because it is taking its time to actually create this realistic and relatable world, and also these deep characters who is not just one-note characters, though they actually feel like people. Meanwhile, we're getting this intriguing mystery surrounding this boy and also his twin sister. Now, this story does take a sweet-ass time to actually get going. You almost have to get through this entire volume before the story actually starting to pick up. And remember, there's only 9 of these. So that's the 9th of the story before we actually get starting with the story. I don't really mind that because the setup really pays off later on, and also it really builds up its theme, which is of course what is an individual. Is your memory defining you? And also the fact that this is a psychological thriller. And a where thriller is slowly built, but also makes a solid foundation for what's gonna come next. And trust me, what's gonna come next is extremely suspenseful. And this manga has some of the most suspenseful scenes I have ever read in any manga ever. Which again, if you've seen what manga I have read, doesn't really speak of much value, but trust me, they are extremely suspenseful. I also like how we dive into the theme of what defines you, the worth of one's memory, and also how you can actually define and change a person into something specific that is out of their control. However, I can't dive too much into these themes because that will be spoiling the story, and trust me, you don't want to be spoiled about this story because it is immensely told, it is very well paced, and it's just beautiful presented. So since we are now done talking about story, let's talk about the art style in this manga, because holy shit, this manga is beautiful. And I know there are a lot of other beautiful manga drawn out there, yes, but this is the most realistic manga I have seen. And I don't mean that the human in here just really looked like photograph of real human, no, but it's just the way it is set, it's quote-unquote shot or drawn, the cinematography in here, the framing, the storytelling, the cinematography, the way people act, the way they express themselves, that is very realistic. I just love the way it just plants its feet deep into the ground and makes sure that nothing is over the top, nothing is unrealistic in here as the way as the world is presented. I even caught myself multiple times just stopping with the reading and just being in full awe of what I saw on the pages. And again, it's not because that something was exceptionally well drawn or anything, but it was just presented in a such realistic yet simple way that I couldn't help myself but just being flabbergasted of what I was presented on the page. And you will be presented with a lot of great cinematography in this manga. It is insane how well Naoki just design a scene and make sure that a camera angle or the position of characters or what they're doing in the scene or what the background is, everything is just really well calculated to make sure that the right theme, the right feeling, the right atmosphere is presented to you as the reader. And I mean, it is hard to explain, and yes, you can't really get this right feeling that I'm trying to describe you with just some screenshots of the manga over here, but trust me, it is just beautiful done. It's like when you see one of those movies where the cinematography, the storytelling, the way they shoot and edit the scene, the acting, everything just come together to form a higher medium of storytelling. And you just soak it all up and are drawn into the scene and you just forget everything else around you. Everything else just becomes fog. The only thing that really matters is the story presented to you in front of you. And this manga does the same. And yeah, I'm getting kind of pretentious here in my explaining of the art style and how he draws things, but trust me, holy I have never seen professional storytelling this good before in manga format. So damn, now the paneling isn't the best paneling in the world. I mean, it's pretty standard, but there's nothing really revolutionary in and on itself, and sometimes it can be kind of hard to distinguish what action is taking place between these panels, but for the most part, you are able to follow up the story and you are also able to follow along with it. However, when it does follow, it does kind of take you out of the story for a bit, but luckily, it almost never happens, and he really makes up with it with stunning framing instead. So it's more like that the focus here is on the framing and not the paneling, but it is fine because it is not an actually heavy series or anything. There's quite little action in here, if at all, and it's more the story itself that carries you through this manga. Which kind of just brings me to the characters. Now there are a lot of characters in here. I mean, there are so many characters that it's sometimes hard to remember the characters when they reappear in the story. I mean, at least for me, sometimes there was a character that reappear who kind of had the same art style as a former character, so I then thought that was that character, but it turned out no, it was a different character that I have seen before who I've forgotten everything about. That is kind of an issue, but then again, I did read this story over the course of 2.5 months, so that might be part of it. However, there are a lot of eyes and noses who are quite the same or at least similar on different characters, which again makes it kind of hard to distinguish between multiple characters. But our main character, Dr. Tenma, is exceptionally well written, and you really do empathize with this man, because even though he is presented with just opposition and hatred and just difficult times and people who doesn't believe in him and the fact that he is hunted by false claims, he still values human life a lot, and he is a doctor, so he can't help himself. So you do see the struggle within him that he wants to take down or at least stop this monster, but he doesn't want to take another life because he is a doctor. And this conflict makes for a lot of great themes and also story points throughout the story in this manga. He's just very well defined, and he does have some character growth throughout the story, which I really appreciate, because the time you know in the beginning of the story and the time you know at the end of the story is two very different people, because he has went through a lot of shite in this story. And I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of character growth in here. The same goes for Johan and Nina, who is the twins in this scenario, where Johan is the quote-unquote monster in here. Now, you don't know that much about Johan because he's not present in the story as much. He's more like the villain behind the scenes, but you do get something to know about him through his actions or the murders he commits, and also the people he gets to murder people for him. And the same goes with Nina. Now, in the beginning, she seems like a too simplistic and boring character, but as the story goes on, you find out that she is not just more three-dimensional than you thought to begin with, but she's also more important yet you originally thought. And again, these two characters also grow throughout the story. I mean, I didn't thought that Johan was actually gonna grow throughout the story, considering he is the main antagonist and he's the one we need to take down, and he has this perfect plan that he wants to set in motion and complete, but he actually also has a lot of character growth. Not that it necessarily redeems him, but it does change his outlook on life and also his former perfect plan. Now, there are a few other characters in here who might be worth mentioning, but I will say that all the characters who are reappearing throughout the story is more or less really well defined, and some of them also has character growth. For example, Tenma's ex-fiancée Eva. Eva throughout the most of the story is just an annoying bitch, and her whole ordeal got tiresome pretty quickly. But she wasn't annoying just to be annoying. There was actually some personal damage hidden beneath the surface that made her act in this way that she then later on had to deal with. And at some points throughout the story, you do see her more gentle and human sides kinda shine through that extremely ugly exterior that she has and kind of masked wears when she's interacting with other people. And I appreciate that. And she is also slowly, more than anyone else, going through character changes and character growth. But just in general, most characters in here are more than just one-note characters. Even the ones who have the smallest amount of screen times, it actually feels like there have been a lot of thought put into them and has been thought and planned out. What is their story? What is their personality? And also just in general, what do they like and what don't they like? And how will that factor in for their choices? Now, I could stand here for ages just gushing over this manga. I was completely blown away about how well written, how well produced and well told this manga was. This is, without a doubt, the best constructed, best told manga I have ever read. Which, in case you need to sum up, it has great story, a great mystery. It seems like for the most part the story has been planned out from the beginning. However, there are some inconsistencies here and there. The art style is fantastic, especially the framing, the themes, the background and cinematography just in general is mind-blowing. Every character just seems like they are very real people. It almost feels like you can go down into the street and just meet them and talk to them. They are that well defined. However, I will put my finger on the ending of this story because I'm not a fan of the ending. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't like this ending because it wasn't the ending that I personally wanted. No. I didn't like this ending because it failed to do so much with Johan and also why he did this at the end as he did. Now, without spoiling anything, all I want to say is that there are some aspects of his final plan that is kind of left too ambiguous for my taste. Yes, again, it might be because you need to analyze some aspect or really just dive into some specific lines in the dialogue. But for me personally, it just felt like there was something missing to really complete this manga, and it just felt like the last few chapters just tried to rush this ending, just wrap everything important questions up as it could, and then leave the rest as ambiguous. But considering how much the story has just built up to the final confrontation with Johan, it doesn't really sell it that good, and it almost ruined it for me. However, I will say that the last chapter, masterful. I loved it. But the final conversation and the dive into Johan's plan, not that very well executed. It's actually one of the few extreme flaws of this manga. It was almost piss poor in my opinion. But you might not agree, and that is okay. So with that in mind, I will say that Monster, it is an epic masterpiece. So even though it might have sounded like that was completely shitting all over the manga's ending, which I kinda did, this is still an extremely well told manga. It is hard to describe how well this manga is written, but trust me, you owe it to yourself to read it if you haven't done it, even though that the ending is not the best ending. And by that I mean the final confrontation with Johan. everything else surrounding the ending was masterful. It was just that it missed something important right there. However, this manga does have a lot of plot twists. It did fool me quite a lot throughout the story, but the beautiful thing is that when it reveals these things to you, you do look back on the story you just read and think to yourself, that makes sense. And you also kind of felt stupid that you didn't see the hints when they were presented to you. And this is the best manga I have ever read so far. But it is still not my favorite manga. I still think that Full Metal Alchemist is my favorite completed manga and One Piece is my favorite ongoing manga. But do give this a go. You owe it to yourself. Especially try to find it in these beautiful, perfect edition. Because holy hell, a ride this was. So, Monster, have you read it? What do you think about it? And what is your favorite manga of all time? Or, more importantly, what is the best manga you have ever read? Because favorite and best might not always be the same thing. And also, what is your thought on the ending of the manga? Which means that if you haven't read the manga, be aware of spoilers in the comments, I guess. Whatever you think, comment below with me your thoughts and sorrows until I see you in the next video. Remember to stay awesome. Bye! Oh, that Johan guy, he's such a creep, but yet so beautiful.